Hey all, I wanted to apologize for the lack of videos over the last 2 weeks. I had to take a much-needed rest. I am dealing with some issues. Let's just leave it at that. I will continue on for as long as humanly possible, but as with anything that I do, I promise to keep you all updated. Anyway, let's get into today's experience. I will post the link to this experience in the comment section below. Before we get into it, truthfully, I don't know what to think of this one, so I will let you all decide. Don't forget, get comfortable, grab a cup of coffee or tea, and let's dive into this experience. This past November 2023, I had been upset for literally a couple of months. I always remember that every September, an event broke up my engagement to a man I loved very much. We were engaged to be married, and we were living together. That period of time was the happiest I've ever been. I was 25 and had just graduated from nursing school. I received my RN and my license, and I had a job at the Children's Hospital Pediatric ICU in Cincinnati in August 1974. The time before was stressful. Finals, graduation, state boards, and starting a new job. Shortly after we settled in, I found out I was pregnant. I was in denial. It was confirmed, and I terminated the pregnancy against his wishes. This caused an irrevocable split in our relationship. We tried but couldn't move past it. This past September, I once again remembered this and was very sad, as I am every year. However, instead of lasting a day or two, I had an overwhelming need to contact him and ask him to forgive me. At that point, although stressed, I wasn't crying. I was still sleeping and eating. I Googled him, and he came up: name, address, and phone number. I saw the address and wondered if it was the same one we lived at. I continued to search, and all that changed was the phone number sometimes. So I started calling numbers, pretty sure I would contact him. After several calls, they were all disconnected. The intensity of the need to contact him became overwhelming. I Googled everyone in Ohio with his name, over 200 men. Since I've done tons of research for my graduate and postgraduate degrees, I could pretty quickly weed through them. I kept searching. All the sites with his exact name and birthday lived in the same place. During one obsessive search, I found his name with a totally different number. His name, his brother Jim, and his father were listed as relatives. I looked back up at his name, and in larger block type under his name in red was the word deceased. I couldn't have missed that before. I felt like someone punched me in the stomach, and I started crying. I was frantic. I could never find that website again. That's when the next 3 months of uncontrollable grief began. I couldn't sleep, had no appetite, and wasn't taking care of anything but my dog. I called Cincinnati Bell, and they had no listing for him or his brother. I called the Ohio Department of Health Records Division, and they confirmed his death in December 2014. I didn't believe he had died. They must have made a mistake. I decided I needed to go to a therapist, so I did. I told her this story and said I needed to go to a priest for confession after 50 years and talk to him too. She told me I had a delayed grief reaction and that touching base with my religion was a good idea. It was. About 2 to 3 weeks after I saw the priest, I had the dream. I was exhausted, not eating, sleep deprived, and my nurse practitioner had given me a low dose of Xanax to take when I started getting upset. It would stop me from crying for a couple of hours, and I didn't want to use it a lot. The night or two before this experience, I was inconsolable. I prayed, real prayers, for the first time in my life. I prayed to St. Jude for intercession, telling him I was in a very dark place, isolated, very afraid, in despair, lost, and grieving, that I was getting physically sick, that I needed something that seemed impossible. I needed to speak to David in person to ask him if he could forgive me, not a dream that would dissipate over days with only fragments remaining, but to actually see, hear, and feel him, the real live him. I went to bed after another night of tossing and turning with no sleep. I got up in the morning to let my dog out and make a cup of tea. I was crying a lot. Around 3 p.m., I went up to take a nap, I can't remember if this was the day right after or the next day. I put my dog on the bed, took half a Xanax, and got into bed. I don't remember anything after that, just getting into bed. The first thing I remember after that was standing in the airport with my cell phone in my hand. I was wondering if I should call the only number I hadn't called, but I just couldn't take one more disconnected number. I had flown in from Richmond and booked a room at the airport hotel overnight because my return flight was in the morning. It was about 7:30 p.m. that night in November 2023. So I decided to dial the number. I was shocked when a woman answered. Her voice was beautiful, soft and pleasant. I asked if this was the household of the person with the last name W, and she said yes. I asked if a David W. lived there. Yes, he does. I asked if she would be okay with me speaking to him. I was an old friend from 50 years ago, and I was here overnight and thought I'd see if I could talk to him. She said, "Of course," and called him to the phone. He got on the phone, and I asked him several questions. He said, not in a mean but abrupt way, "Who is this?" I said, "Bonnie." There was a pause. I thought my name had upset him, and he hung up. Then he said, "I've waited 50 years for you to call me." I was a bit shocked. He then asked where I was. I told him I was at the airport and needed to speak to him face to face, preferably only if his housekeeper agreed. He started laughing and said, "Wife? I'm not married. That's my housekeeper." I told him that it was unfair because I didn't have one either. I said that if he was amenable, I'd take an Uber to his place, or meet him at a restaurant, or here at the hotel for dinner and a drink. He asked me where at the airport I was. I said the Delta terminal at the baggage check. He told me he'd come to the airport and get me, but it would take about 40 minutes. I told him I'd sit and wait for him to pull up. He said he'd see me shortly. I didn't ask him what kind of car he would be driving. It had been 50 years. I noticed there were 2 pieces of luggage on the conveyor belt at the baggage station. It didn't bother me that I was the only person in the airport. I heard footsteps and looked up. I asked if it was him, although I already knew it was. His face wasn't completely in focus, but I recognized him. He told me he would recognize me anywhere. He said he was in the garage and wanted me to walk with him. We went into the garage, and I looked up. I was shocked to see a 1969 vintage blue VW Beetle parked there, flawless. I asked him if that was his car, and he said it was. I told him it didn't have a scratch or dent. He said he knew. I asked if he and Jim had taken up restoring antique cars as a hobby, and he just smiled. He took my overnight bag, and I got into the car. I could smell the new car scent and noticed the interior was flawless. When he got in, I asked him if he ever drove the car. He said, "Yes, I have." All during this dream, he didn't lie, but would answer equivocally to some questions, so no lies. We drove up I-75 toward Cincinnati. I know it was I-75. It was dark out. I asked why he didn't let me take an Uber to his place. He said, "I've come to take you home." I thought that was an interesting way to say, "Let's go to my place and have a glass of wine." Shortly after, I asked him if he could ever forgive me for what I did to him and our life. He told me he had forgiven me decades ago, another interesting phrase, and that he'd always loved me and still did. I wasn't upset, nor did I cry. We took an off-ramp in the city that leads up to the university. I asked him if he still lived there. He said yes. I thought some people just don't like change. We pulled onto Clifton Avenue, then turned left onto Ludlow, and then right onto a couple of streets down. I asked him if this was the way to where our house was. He said yes. I looked up, pointed to a street sign, and asked if that wasn't the street we lived on, and if our house was about 3 houses from the corner. Yes. We pulled up in front of the house, and I was shocked. It looked exactly the same as when I lived there. Inside, it was even more eerie. It looked exactly as it did before. I looked to my right. On a telephone table was the black rotary dial phone we once had. I asked him if it was the same one. Yes. I asked him if it worked, and if the local infrastructure supported a 50-year-old phone. His answer was, "Well, you called me on it." I was shocked and asked him where his cell phone was. He said he didn't have one. He didn't need one. I thought to myself, how lucky can a person be? More exact things followed: the couch, the kitchen appliances, and so on. He made me some toast and tea, remembering exactly how I liked both. He said he remembered everything about me. I was shocked. Then he took my hand, and as we walked toward the bedroom, he said he wanted to make love to me. I said, "Absolutely not. That's not why I came to see you." He smiled and said, "I know." We went into the bedroom, and lovely yellow sunlight was coming in through the window. It was warm, sunny, and perfect. I looked at the bed and noticed the sheets. They were the same ones he had bought me when I started staying with him, with tiny pink and blue roses. I looked up at him, and without shock, told him he looked exactly as he did at 26. He told me he was 26. I didn't doubt him. When he told me I was 25, I said, "No, I'm 74 and an old lady." He kindly asked me to turn around and look at myself. I was so shocked, I turned around, pointing my finger as if to ask him what was going on. Calmly and lovingly, he asked me to look in the mirror. The first thing I saw was my graduation picture from nursing school. I had gotten him one and had it framed. Looking into the mirror, I was shocked. I looked exactly as I had at 25. I was perplexed. I saw him in the mirror, in the background, in focus. He told me again he wanted to make love, and yet again I said no. I was 74 and hadn't come here to have sex. I came to talk with him about what happened and to ask him to forgive me. He said, "I know." He picked me up, placed me in the middle of the bed, covered me up, got in next to me, and held me. I had an indescribable sensation. The room was filled with a filtered soft light, surrounding me completely. I could see nothing but the light and myself. I could hear and feel him holding me. I told him I never wanted him to stop holding me. He held me tighter, and the feeling was immense. Love, forgiveness, acceptance, everything good and right. He told me I was pregnant with his baby. At that point, I sort of told him no. I couldn't get pregnant again, and I was 74. He said, "Look at yourself." I did. I was totally shocked. I literally looked 25. Next, we stood up. The light enveloped everything but us. He held my hand, and I sensed he was leading me somewhere. I could see only him and me. There was no sense of up, down, left, or right. He said he had a question to ask me. I said, "Okay." He asked if I would carry our baby to term. In that split second, I knew I had a choice. I said yes. He told me we would be unbelievably happy raising our family. We were to be married that very night. I didn't want this to stop. I didn't want to leave. He told me there were a few small things I had to do first, and that then we'd be a family, and I'd never have to worry about anything ever again, not even money. I would experience a type of love I can't imagine, one that is immeasurable and forever. I felt like I was pulled back and then was wide awake. I looked around my room because the last place I was had been at David's house. I looked at Molly and asked her, "What just happened to me?" This whole 6-month-long experience has given me a totally different perspective on my life. I'm not afraid of dying anymore. I realize there is an afterlife. I instinctively know what those little things I need to do are. I went back to my church. I've learned that I have to forgive myself, forgive several other people, and stop trying to control things I have no control over. I will be with him and our baby, and he'll be there so I won't be alone, and we'll walk home together. That does it for this video. Until next time, whenever that may be, take care and stay blessed.